The gate that locked her out had been oiled 2 days before the funeral. Jenna Pruitt noticed that standing in the gravel, with her clothes tied in a bedsheet, a rusted coffee tin holding what documents she owned, and a worn Bible her mother had carried to church for 30 years. Wade didn't bother turning around when he snapped the padlock shut with a chain he'd bought from the hardware store in town the week her father died. Just said over his shoulder, voice flat as the dirt road stretching away from the house, "Property's ours now, deeds recorded, county clerk. All legal, you can go." Jenna didn't scream, didn't cry. Stood there looking at the cottonwood tree she'd planted when she was 9, the one that had taken root against all odds in that hard-pan soil, and thought clearly, without heat. He planned this before Dad was even cold. But there was something Wade didn't know. Something nobody knew except a woman who'd kept a secret for 22 years. And that secret was buried under a flat stone inside the old equipment shed. The same shed her father had pointed to in a photograph 3 months before he died, his arm extended, finger aimed down with a deliberation that wasn't accidental. Before we continue, remember that this is still a small channel, and I could really use your support. Please like the video and subscribe. It's free, and it helps more than you know. The Pruitt place had been in the family since 1969. Carl Pruitt had arrived with empty pockets and a borrowed shovel, cleared the first field by hand, raised his children listening to rain on a tin roof like it was the only music worth hearing. Jenna was the middle child. Learned to check fence line before she learned multiplication. Could tell when the soil needed turning by the way her boot heels sank. After her mother passed and her father started losing his memory in pieces, she was the one who stayed. Her brother went to Albuquerque. Her sister married Wade and moved to Las Cruces. Jenna stayed. Woke at 4:30, negotiated with equipment dealers, cared for her father, taught herself drip irrigation from YouTube videos on a phone with a cracked screen, did what needed doing without being asked. Wade had started showing up more often the last 2 years. Not to help. He'd arrive on weekends, sit on the porch with coffee someone else made, and watch the alfalfa fields with that smile people wear when they're calculating the value of something that doesn't belong to them yet. Once, when Carl was napping, Jenna found Wade in the office going through the file cabinet. "Just organizing," he said without moving, without asking permission. She didn't say anything, but she remembered. What ate at Wade wasn't ordinary ambition. It was old resentment. At every family meal, every harvest meeting, he'd heard the same thing. Jenna's the one holding it together. Without her, this place would have gone under years ago. Never him, always her. And that settled inside him in layers, quiet and corrosive, until the day Carl couldn't sign his own name with confidence anymore. That's when Wade saw his opening and walked through it. 2 months after Carl's funeral, Wade showed up with a man in a pressed suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Vincent Mallory, attorney. The kind who talked faster than most people could follow. He laid a 4-page document on the kitchen table, tapped it once with his index finger like a man closing a deal. "Transfer of property rights. Your father signed this 6 months ago, left the entire Pruitt place to your sister Delia and to Wade here as her spouse." Jenna read it twice, then a third time. "6 months ago, Dad couldn't remember my name half the time." Signed with assistance. Perfectly legal. Assistance from who? Wade picked up his coffee mug, the coffee Jenna had made, took a slow sip and answered without hurry. "From Delia and a notary, all recorded, all clean." He smiled slightly. "I know it's hard to accept, but this place isn't yours anymore." Jenna folded the document carefully, handed it back. "I'll need a few days to get my things." Wade hadn't expected that. Expected a fight. Tears, threats. "Sure," he said, relieved too soon. Jenna left without another word. But before closing the door, she looked across the yard one last time. The cottonwood, The old equipment shed, the flat stone near the back wall with dark moss growing on only one side, stored it all in memory, like someone who knows they'll need to come back. What she didn't know yet was the size of what was buried under that stone. Jenna moved into the back room at Loretta Hatch's place. Loretta was her mother's cousin, 74, who didn't ask questions and made coffee strong enough to strip paint. Jenna worked day labor on 2 neighboring ranches. That's how she ended up at Cimarron Creek Ranch and met Doris. Doris Kern was 65, white hair cut short, hands that looked like they'd washed every dish in Grant County over 4 decades. Doris had worked at the Pruitt place when she was young, had known Jenna's mother, had carried a secret for 22 years. It took almost a month for her to speak. She worked beside Jenna every day, had opportunity every morning, but every time she started to say something, she'd close her mouth, look at the ground, go back to work. It was a Wednesday afternoon, Jenna asking about her mother with no agenda, just missing her out loud, that Doris stopped what she was doing. Stayed quiet for a long time, then said, not looking at her, "I need to tell you something, but you have to understand why I waited so long." "Okay." Doris took a breath. "Before your father bought that land, it had a previous owner, man named Thomas Wardell. When he sold to your father in 1969, he didn't just sign the deed. He signed a separate covenant, a private declaration guaranteeing water rights from the spring to the direct heirs of the buyer, in perpetuity. Your mother kept that paper." Jenna stayed quiet. "Why does that matter now?" Doris finally looked at her. "Because that spring is the only water source that irrigates the north section. Without it, half the property won't produce anything. And the covenant says only Carl Pruitt's direct heirs can use that water. Wade isn't an heir. Delia transferred her rights when she signed that document with him." She paused. "Without the spring, what he took isn't worth half what he thinks it is. I should have told you sooner, when your father got sick, when you saw that transfer document. But I was afraid of giving you hope that didn't exist." "Does the paper still exist?" "I don't know. Your mother told me it was kept inside a tobacco tin, wrapped in canvas, under the flat stone behind the equipment shed." They sat in silence. The flat stone behind the equipment shed. The same one Jenna had looked at the day she left. There was also the photograph. Carl, younger, standing at the shed entrance, his arm extended, finger pointing down, with a firmness that wasn't casual, a firmness like someone marking something for later. Loretta had confirmed it. The old man had asked for that photo when he could still speak, had insisted twice. Nobody understood at the time. Jenna understood now. She called her cousin Ben. They went in through the back, along the creek bed, no flashlight, on a night with no moon. Jenna knew that ground better than any ground on earth. In the shed, she found the stone with moss on one side only. Pulled. There was a hollow lined with canvas. Inside the canvas, a rusted tobacco tin. Inside the tin, folded 4 times, a document. She opened it slowly. The folds had left dark creases. Part of one line had faded, but the essential parts were there. Thomas Wardell's name, the date, March 1969, the description of the spring, the water rights clause for direct heirs of the buyer, and at the bottom, in different handwriting, wider letters, ink that had faded to pale blue. "Keep this safe, honey. One day you'll need it." "We good?" Ben whispered from outside. She didn't answer. Held the paper in her hands for a time she couldn't measure. The lawyer who helped Jenna was named Louise Garrett, 69 years old, retired from the district court. Came back to the county because she was tired of watching justice get purchased by whoever could afford the better attorney. She looked at the document and said, "Alone, this won't win anything. A good lawyer will disqualify it in 20 minutes." But Thomas Wardell's name led to the county archive. Roy, who'd been organizing records nobody wanted for 38 years, found the original water rights filing in under an hour, with witnesses notarized, and in Wardell's estate inventory there was a document verification line signed by Vincent T. Mallory. Jenna said out loud what Louise was thinking. He's related to Wardell. Went to the notary with Wade knowing about the water covenant. That's not omission, Louise said. That's conspiracy. They filed the motion the following week, but Wade found out first. That same night, Loretta opened the door to find Wade standing there. No lawyer, no briefcase, just him, 8:30 at night, wearing that smile, but this time his eyes weren't smiling with it. Need to talk to her. It's late, Wade. I'm trying to handle this civilly, but if she pushes this nonsense, she's going to get hurt worse than she already is. Loretta didn't step back. Good night, Wade, and closed the door, told Jenna word for word. He's scared, Jenna said, but scared in Wade didn't mean retreat. It meant danger. The next morning, Harlan, the only witness who could destroy everything, disappeared. Harlan had agreed to testify. He was the oldest hand on the Pruitt place. Had seen with his own eyes the day Delia arrived with Wade and the lawyer. Had seen the paper placed in front of Carl. Had seen the old man's trembling hand guided by another. He was the piece that connected everything. 3 days before the hearing, he didn't answer his phone. Wasn't at his trailer. The owner of the ranch where he'd been working said only that he'd asked for time off. Louise called with a voice holding too much inside. They got to him before we did. Without Harlan, the timeline collapsed. The archive proved the covenant, but without a witness connecting Wade to a coerced signature, Mallory would turn it all into coincidence. How long do we have? 72 hours. It was Ben who remembered Nina, the home health aide who'd cared for Carl on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. She wasn't a witness to anything legal. She'd cared for an old man she called Mr. Carl because she had the heart for it. When he died, she went to the funeral alone, stood in the back, and left before anyone knew who she was. When Louise went to her, Nina told her about an afternoon she'd never told anyone. He kept trying to write something. I held his hand. He was making a letter. Looked like a W, kept staring at me like it was the most important thing in the world. I didn't understand. I just smiled at him so he wouldn't get agitated. She stopped. After the nurse came, he kept looking at me, only stopped when I left the room. He was trying to tell you a name, Louise said. Nina stayed quiet. I could have asked more. Could have stayed longer. Louise didn't say anything. Let the silence sit. Harlan appeared the morning of the hearing. Ben brought him. He got out of the truck slowly, not lazy slow, hurt slow. Had a small bandage on the right side of his neck. Subtle. Walked with his left shoulder slightly stiff. The kind of stiffness that shows when someone got caught off guard and it hasn't passed yet. Louise looked, didn't ask. You don't have to tell me anything, just need to know if you're still going in. Harlan stared at the ground for a long time, then raised his eyes. They went to my sister's house, didn't do anything, just went, stood out front looking. Louise stayed still. You can walk in whenever you're ready. The hearing was on a Thursday in March. Outside the courthouse, people from 4 counties showed up. Ben with his hat in his hand, Doris leaning against the wall, arms crossed, Loretta with her rosary between her fingers. Wade arrived in a suit, tie, polished shoes, walked down the hallway like a man entering a business meeting already won, past Jenna in the corridor. She was facing away, didn't turn. He looked at her for a second, then at his own shoes, and went into the courtroom with Mallory beside him. The judge was named Patricia Orozco, mid-50s, direct manner, no tolerance for theater. Harlan went first, voice steady. What did you see when you saw it? Where were you? When he finished, he didn't look at Wade, looked at his own hands, and the bandage was visible for a second before he pulled his collar up. Nina described the afternoon Carl tried to write, described his eyes, described how she'd smiled to keep from scaring an old man who was asking for help the only way he still could. The room stayed quiet during her testimony. Not the quiet of waiting, the quiet of understanding something you didn't know you needed to understand. Mallory tried to disqualify the document. Informal record without definitive probative value. Judge Orozco asked why he'd signed the verification line on his cousin's estate inventory if the document was informal. Standard procedure. The judge wrote something down, said nothing. Wade asked to speak, stood up, suit pressed, tie straight, voice firm, chin lifted, started saying he'd honored the family's wishes, that he had recorded documentation, that Jenna had refused to cooperate. Louise raised her hand. The judge nodded. The attorney stood, looked at Wade with the calm of someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to land a blow. You didn't inherit this property. You waited, with patience, with planning. You waited until a man in his 80s couldn't say no anymore. You used your wife's signature, someone you convinced to sign without understanding what she was giving up. And when you realized you were going to lose, you showed up at night to intimidate your sister-in-law on her porch, sent people to stand in front of a witness's sister's house. She turned to the judge. I'm finished. The room went quiet. Wade was still standing. For a second, he still had the posture of someone about to respond, shoulders back, suit pressed, script ready, but the words didn't come. And without the words, the posture left too. His shoulders dropped, not all at once, slowly, like air leaving something inflated too long. The tie suddenly looked tight. His hand on the table closed into a fist, stayed that way, then opened. He didn't know what to do with that hand. He looked at Jenna, not with defiance, not with anger, not with the calculated smile he'd worn for 2 years, with the look of someone reaching the end of a long calculation and finding the answer was 0. Jenna didn't look away. Wade did, lowered his eyes and didn't raise them again for the rest of the hearing. Judge Orozco issued a temporary restraining order that day, suspending the property transfer, ordering handwriting analysis on the transfer document, and opening a disciplinary investigation into Vincent T. Mallory. When Jenna walked out, the hallway was full. Nobody shouted, nobody applauded. Ben put his hand on her shoulder for a second. Loretta squeezed her hand hard and didn't say anything. Doris stood with her arms crossed, eyes shining. Harlan was against the back wall. Jenna stopped in front of him. What did you lose? Doesn't matter. It does to me. He stayed quiet. Enough to know I did the right thing. Wade left through the opposite exit. Didn't look at anyone. Suit still pressed. Shoes still polished, neither of which had served him at all. The final ruling came 7 months later. The transfer document was voided, the water covenant was recognized, the Pruitt place returned to the direct heir. Delia received what was hers by right, 1/3, minus the portion corresponding to the spring, which returned to Jenna's sole control. Vincent T. Mallory was suspended by the state bar for 2 years. Jenna returned to the property on an April morning, opened the gate. Same old wood, no chain now, no lock, walked in, didn't stand contemplating, went straight to the pump that always made a bad noise, crouched, put her hand on the casing and heard the problem through touch. Would need a new part, would need money she didn't have yet. That was fine. She'd waited through harder things, checked the fences, passed the cottonwood, taller than when she'd left, went into the shed, knelt, lifted the stone, took out the tin, held it for a moment, then put it back, covered the stone, stood up, went to work. Harlan received a job offer a week after signing his termination papers. The letter didn't say from whom, just an address, a wage, and a start date. He started. Ben got a raise he didn't ask for. Doris received a basket every month and returned the wrapping folded carefully, without comment. Wade called 2 months later. proposed a practical conversation. No ceremony. Jenna listened, said she'd think about it, hung up, stood still for a moment, then went to get the accounts ledger for the season because there were calculations to finish before end of day. The shed stayed with the door unlocked. Not from carelessness, from choice. Because Jenna had learned that year that some things don't need locks. The person who plants is the person who harvests.